Hello there folks, and welcome back to another video. In this one we're going to be diving into another one of the battle tomes for Warhammer Age of Sigmar and the new edition. And now we're going to be having a peek at the Daughters of Khaine, who are another one of the battle tomes that came out alongside the Sylvaneth fairly recently. As with all of my videos, this is going to be a 5 things I love about the Warhammer Age of Sigmar battle tomes. It is not an in-depth look at the rules, although I will be flicking through this and showing off all the different pages one by one. But if you're interested in just sort of hearing my thoughts about 5 things I think are pretty badass about the Daughters of Khaine, then please dive in and follow along. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff that people tell you to do on YouTube. There are affiliate links down below for Firestorm Games, War Games Atlantic, and there's even a Ko-fi link down there as well. You can also become a member of the channel if you want, and if you do become a member, then you can follow along with my hobby vlogs way ahead of everybody else when they get to see them publicly. That's just a little thing that I'm doing at the moment before I can get things properly started up. But yes, all of that helps. On with the video though, we have a brand new battle tome for the Daughters of Khaine, which came with the new Blood Hags, which were the brand new miniatures who feature front and center. Gotta say, whoever is doing the artwork for the new books, you are doing a pretty damn good job of them, as you can see here. But yes, let's dive in and have a look at this one in even more detail. So, Daughters of Khaine are an army that I have been actually quite tempted by fairly recently, mainly because of some of the new miniatures that have come out for them, but I also think that a lot of the Methuselah stuff and the the snake ladies look rather badass. It is an army that I think suffers a little bit from being a little bit hard for you to get hold of all the bits and pieces for it, because everything is sort of intertwined with another set or part of something else, which doesn't necessarily matter too much if you can get the bits separately on eBay and things like that. But it's just one of those forces that is a little bit awkward. Now, as I said in my Sylvaneth video, which hopefully you've watched already, one of the things that I really like about Age of Sigmar and the Elven factions is that all the elves feel like they are good, but with sort of inverted commas around them. Like, for example, in the case of the Daughters of Khaine, you have a force that is clearly trying to rid the world of evil and chaos, and as is stated as part of the battle tome, they are a force that abhors chaos in all of its forms and will hunt them down and kill everything under Morathi Kane's will. But they are also a force that is not opposed to just killing everything and doing whatever the hell they like, essentially. And I think that's really cool that it comes through in this, as you can see. Like here you can hear about them fighting alongside the humans, but then also being like, no, we're here and this is our city now. We'll talk about it a little bit more later. But I love that there's sort of like this sort of slightly mysteriously evil quality, a little bit of that kind of shades of grey about them as a faction, which I think works really, really nicely. As with all of the battle tomes, you have a big look at the map for the Daughters of Khaine and sort of where they fit into everything and where they sort of sit in Ulgu, the realm of shadows. You also have a breakdown of all the different key locations as well, so if you are looking to build an army for this, then you have the options there as well, which I think is quite nice. So you've got that one there. And this one here, which also covers the Nest of the Crones here. Ooh, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I really love that they're doing these big maps. I have talked about in the past how a lot of people have been like, well, I don't know what the Mortal Realms looks like, and I don't know how it fits into things, and I don't know where things are. Well, this is where these maps come in. I wish that they made these maps available to people to have a look at, because this is just a really nice snapshot of Ulgu for you to dive into and get an idea of how things work. It's about as detailed and as easy to understand as a planetary map in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. So, and I bet you know more about the realms of Warhammer Age of Sigmar than you do about the different planets of 40k. There we go. Anyway, rant over. Diving in, I did want to have a little bit of a highlight as my first thing that I love about the Daughters of Khaine was a little bit more about their sort of like how they fit into the grand scheme of things. So you obviously have Morathi Khaine herself, Morathi, who has ascended to become the version that you see here, looking rather badass. But this was a nice little snippet here about Malarion, the Shadow King, which I thought was really fun. So there can be few more complicated familial relationships than that of Malarion, the shadowy master of Ulgu, and his mother Morathi. These two beings existed before the mortal realms came to be, having ruled their own great elven civilizations in the forgotten days of the world that was. They have pivoted between mortal enemies and tentative allies 100 times in their long history, each wounding the other more times than they can remember. It was Malarion who granted his mother the island dominion of Hagnar when they were reunited during the Age of Myth. As to why he would give Morathi such a formidable source of magical power is known only to the Shadow King. Absolutely love that. So yes, some really cool stuff in the background there that is kind of getting people excited about where Malarion's going to fit into things. A little bit like Kurnoth for the Sylvaneth. I actually think we might be seeing supplement maybe for the Daughters of Khaine in the future too. I mean, that could be quite fun to see where they go with that, but I suppose we shall have to wait and see. But yes, really nice that we're getting a little bit more of sort of like the background of her and sort of how she fits into things. But also that Malarion stuff was a nice little tidbit that I wanted to bring out. First of all, you also have a little bit more about the Crone Seer herself. So Crethusa is a servant of Morai Heg, so a little bit of a different fit for her within the faction of the Daughters of Khaine. Sort of takes the faction in a different direction as well, away from the sort of blood-soaked murder of Morathi Khaine. Well, I mean, there's still a lot of blood, but via a slightly different route. They are sort of allies now, even after there was a little bit of a civil war between them. But I love that that kind of like fills through. You also have a little bit more about the taking of Anvilgard. So this was one of the things that happened when she ascended to power, when Morathi Khaine ascended to power. So Harkuron, as one who must deal with some of humanity's most truculent blowhards, I can state with authority that the issue of Harkuron will never be decided through diplomatic means. One day it will come to blood, and the streets of this sweltering city will be strewn with the corpses of humans and elves, considerably more of the former naturally. The humans have never accepted Morathi Khaine's liberation of that city. They will never accept that, had my mystery not intervened, Anvilgard would have succumbed to corruption and greed, torn apart from within by its hopelessly compromised Grand Conclave. She had no choice. Blood was spilled, yes, but not egregiously so. And what was the populace gain in return? Safety, security, true strength and faith. And I love that, because it sort of like goes, yes, they are part of this kind of like force of order that is working together, but with her own ideas and her own means. If Anvilgard were to be returned to Sigmar's rule, all the progress would be frittered away in an instant, but still the dull humans resist, as is their nature. The Charwing coast is thick with malcontents, criminals and rebels, even as the Skaven bear down on axe sheaf from all corners. I suspect that although Sigmar formally accepts Morathi's rule of Harkunon, the God King's minions are pouring weapons and ammunition to the city with the aim of a full-scale uprising. That will be a day when the gutters run over with gore. Truly, it cannot come soon enough. And I think that's really awesome to have that sort of like in-depth look at sort of this infighting within what's happening as part of this sort of fractious alliance between the two forces on the tabletop, which is really cool. Some really nice stuff here about Crethusa, who was hunting down a silver tower and the forces of Zench, which I thought was quite neat. Nice little bit there of them sort of working together. And I gotta say, the actual artwork behind the Daughters of Khaine has been a really nice update, and I think they've done a really nice job of it. I love the Methuselah stuff. I think the snake ladies look super badass. And it's something that I think they should really sort of latch onto a little bit more when it comes to them. I also love that Morathi Khaine and the Shadow Queen are like one and the same, but slightly different as well. Like you have the version of Morathi Khaine as she sees herself as this sort of like grand leader. Then the other half of her sort of personality has been torn apart from her, and then that's where you get the Shadow Queen and sort of how she fits into the equation. But I think my favourite of the most recent additions to the Daughters of Khaine has actually got to be Crethusa, the Crone Seer. So she, as I said, is a servant of Morai Heg, and this was one of the gods of old who was sort of consumed by Slaanesh many, many years ago as well. But now she sort of like has risen up sort of in contest to Morathi. She doesn't quite trust Morathi Khaine and what she's done is sort of like ascent to godhood, sort of ascending in Khaine's name, I suppose you'd say. But they've had a meeting now, and they're sort of now almost on the same side. She sort of acts as like a prophetess and a sort of seer for Morathi Khaine, and so has her own ideas and sort of where she wants to take things and what she wants to do. But I think there's sort of like a really interesting sort of route aesthetically that they can do with the Daughters of Khaine to sort of take them down this sort of route of the sort of Raven Keepers, the Crow Keepers, play around with that aesthetic a bit more, step away from the blood and the sort of gladiators and that kind of thing. Keep that as it is as part of like a faction, but have this sort of sub-faction of Cthulhu really brought to the fore. I think it would be really fascinating, and there's some great lore in here as well about that. It all comes together. But yes, love Cthulhu the Croneseer. That's one of my number ones. You then have a breakdown of even more stuff. So this is where you sort of break down into all the different elements of the Daughters of Khaine and sort of where they've sort of transferred things over from previous versions of them on the tabletop. So you have things like the Cursed Cistern, the Methuselah Iron Scales. There's still something cool about the sort of gladiatorial thing. I love the idea of like these witch elves going in and just sort of like battling each other to the death, slaying all sorts of different monsters and that kind of thing, killing each other in the name of Khaine. It's very sort of akin to the classic dark elves of Warhammer Fantasy battles and the world that was. And I like that it is still an element of their force on the tabletop. I think it's a really nice sort of addition to sort of carry through, and I think the artwork is still gorgeous for that at the same time. I like the idea that you could do a really fun little sort of mini game maybe around the around the Daughters of Khaine and the gladiatorial combat that they fight. I think you could do a really nice job of putting together like a little mini game where they have to fight different monsters and each other as well. A bit like with Gorchos and things like that. I think that'd be a really nice sort of way for them to go if they were going to make a little game to go around it. A bit more on them as well. The Blood Hags. I think the Blood Hags are a really nice addition to the Daughters of Khaine and something that shouldn't necessarily be overlooked. I know a lot of people were sort of like poo-pooed the Blood Hags. We'll talk about them a little bit more later, actually, because they're one of the things that I actually love. But I think they're a really nice addition to the Force. And I'll go into a bit more detail on them as we move deeper into the book. But yes, one of my favourites actually has to be the Melusai Warriors, sorry. There's something about them and their aesthetic that I think just works really nicely for Warhammer Age of Sigmar. They're different enough from the existing Daughters of Khaine stuff on foot to make them feel like they could be a cohesive elite army, and it fits with the idea of you running the Shadow Queen and these big snake monster goddess thing on the tabletop. I like that they kind of got this really nice split between them as well. So you have the Blood Sisters, who are your slightly more elite elements, and then you have the Blood Stalkers, who are your ranged focus. So you could split between the two of them very easily on the tabletop and do a really nice force based around them. I think it works really well with the aesthetic that we've seen from things like the Sylvaneth as well, where you have that kind of remnant of the old elves, but then also something new and something a little bit different in the way that they've got that kind of snake bodies as well. So it fits with the aesthetic of the Force without looking super weird or a little bit awkward and stuff like that. And I think it'd be a really cool army for you to build based around them. So I just love the aesthetic of them, and I think that's a really nice thing to do with that kind of like elite vibe to the Force on the tabletop. So yes, definitely the way that I would go if I was building one of these armies on the tabletop as well. I also really like, and I don't tend to talk too much about the rules of these armies, because I'm not a rules person. As I always say, I'm a big fan of Rob the Honest Wargamer, so if you want to learn a little bit more about the rules of a faction, go and check out his videos where he goes through all the Battletome reviews and talks about how they work and that kind of thing. But if you are somebody who is interested in learning a little bit more about the Force and you want to know whether or not it's worth picking up for you, maybe just pause the video and have a look at some of the faction rules and things like that to see whether or not this works for you. I do really like the vibe behind the battle trait for this. So you have the Anointed Ritualist. So you make one of your heroes this anointed, and they get a bunch of different benefits from slaughtering things, killing things, being destroyed, all that kind of stuff. And that sort of anointed title passes through your army as they get killed and they get replaced by somebody else, which I think is really cool. But you've got this really nice thing where, like, here we go. You can use this ability, blah, 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 blah. Pick one of the following active blessings that is not active. That blessing is then active. While a blessing is active, it affects to all friendly Daughters of Khaine. As you can see here, really nice stuff there. So you've got Blessing of Shadows, Blessing of Haste, blah, blah, blah. But then you've also got this stuff with the Anointed here, which ties into how they work on the tabletop and what they can do. So you can do all sorts of horrible things to your people, to the enemies and stuff like that, like the Strident War Cry and things, which I think is really cool. And I love that it also ties together to this idea that you have one Daughter of Khaine who has been kind of blessed with the ability to go out and kick ass and take names. And do some really badass stuff to people on the tabletop. I think it's a really nice sort of narratively driven special rule for the army that fits quite well. It's alongside things like the Overgrowth that we saw previously for the Daughters of Khaine. You also have all of the battle formations there, the heroic traits, the artifacts of power, the spell laws there too, prayer laws and manifestation laws. And then you have the rules themselves. So you have the Shadow Queen of Morathi and Malarion, who come as 2 individuals, essentially, and are essentially nigh unkillable. Really badass force to use on the tabletop. I wonder, does she still have her thing where she can't be killed, or whatever it was? There was like a particular thing that she could do. I think it's been taken off her, actually. Where she can't actually take enough damage. Yeah, I think they've actually removed it. So, or maybe it's on the other thing. I can't remember. Maybe. Someone will let me know in the comments down below. Yours rules for Crethusa the Crone Seer, your Slaughter Queens and Hag Queens that come as part of those big sets, like these big towering ones. So this is the thing that I don't like about this, that you have to get them, you have to buy them. I suppose you could just buy them anyway and just not put them on, and then you could switch it around. But I don't really want to buy a massive cauldron of blood just for those models if you want to run them on foot. But anyway, I'm sure it's something that they'll solve in future versions of the Battletome. You also have the different characters here, so you've got things like the Blood Rat Medusa, who I think is super cool. Oh my god, she's so badass. I love the idea of doing her in that kind of red scheme that we saw earlier. Let's see if I can go back and find that. It's somewhere back here. Yes, doing the bloody version of the Blood Rat Medusa, I think is a super badass vibe. And there's a snake army. Oh my god, it's so good. Anyway. Your High Gladiatrix there as well, alongside your Witch Elves and Sisters of Slaughter for your standard battle line units for the army. And then you have the Blood Hags themselves. So they're the new unit for the force. They come with their Kirikes and their Valthrai. And then they are the Wicked Wardens. So while this unit is holding within 20 of a friendly Hag Queen or Cauldron of Blood, Slaughter Queen on Cauldron of Blood, or a Shrine of Dark Tribute, this unit's melee weapons have anti-charge +1 men. So they are this defender unit, which I think is quite nice. And then you have the Crimson Offerings. So if this unit was destroyed by this unit's combat, if a enemy unit was destroyed by this unit's combat attack, so this turn, when resolve this ability, you can pick 2 blessings instead of 1. Love that. Very cool indeed. Now, a lot of people didn't like the Blood Hags because when they saw the models for them, they were like, "Oh, well, they're far too armored. I don't like this. They're meant to be the Daughters of Khaine. Where are their midriffs?" I think it works for them being Shrine Guardians. I think it just makes sense for them to be slightly more armoured. They're a more defensive unit in the way that they've been described and how they're set up. So it kind of makes sense that they would be dressed the way they are. And I think they look super badass as well. I think when I saw these, and I particularly saw the Champion miniature, I was like, I am gonna get me some of these. Even if I don't actually play the army, I think they're a gorgeous new unit. And it's a really nice aesthetic for the Force. That doesn't mean to say that I don't like the idea of having all the other stuff for the Daughters of Khaine. I think the other stuff looks brilliant as well. It's just, I think that's a really cool aesthetic choice for them to have. And I think it's a really nice way for them to take the Force as well. So yes, really love the Blood Hags. I think they're a great addition to the army as a whole. But yes, all the rest of your different profiles here as well. Flicking through those as we go to the end. The Shrine of Dark Tribute there, which is with the new one, can actually be changed to have either the, I think it's the Rune of Moray Heg or Khaine's Iron Heart, depending on which way you want to go with the followers of your Daughters of Khaine force. And then you have the big Spearhead army, which would actually be a good way for you to get all of the different characters that I was just talking about in one box set for a cheaper price, because then you can just separate them and put them all onto different bases, because you do actually get the big Cauldron of Blood, which you can then break down into different things. So you can actually have it that you have the Hag Queen, the Blood Rank Medusa, the Slaughter Queen on Cauldron of Blood, etc, etc. So you can break that down and use it as well as having it as that sort of shrine. So you could even potentially just buy that, break it down, use them all individually, and then come back and play the Spearhead if you really want to, or not, depending on where you want to go with it. So it's actually not that bad, I suppose, in the grand scheme of things, if you go down the Spearhead route. You also then have all of your Path to Glory stuff as well. So if you're interested in playing through the narrative version of, the even more narrative version of Warhammer Sigmar, you have those options there as well, which I think is quite nice. Lots of different ways for you to go with that, depending on which way you wanted to go. And then you have some fun Armies of Renown as well. I think the one that I chose was this one, which is the slightly more gladiatorial one, which is the Champions of the Arena. So this is where you have the Gladiatrix, the Hag Queen, the Slaughter Queen, the Blood Hags, Sisters of Slaughter, the Witch Elves, and then you have a new set of battle traits. So you have the Arena of Slaughter instead, which I think is really nice. If the number of units, friendly or enemy, that have been destroyed this battle equal or exceeds any of the numbers below, the corresponding effects apply to the friendly Champions of the Arena units for the rest of the battle. More than one effect can apply. Add one to the run rolls, add one to the charge rolls, add one to the hit rolls, add one to the win rolls, add one to the attack rolls. I love that, and it's all about just letting the blood flow, which is really cool. All effects of the Arena of Slaughter ability apply to the friendly champions of the arena. Units that are wholly within X of a friendly Shrine of Dark Tribute, where X is determined by the current battle round. So you need to get yourself a Shrine of Dark Tribute in there as well, which is very cool. Frenzied Restorations. Pick a friendly champion of the arena that has been destroyed to be the target. Set up a replacement unit. Badass as well, because obviously you want to try and get things killed, so you want some way of getting them back. And then Explosive Fury, pick a friendly Slaughter Queen to use this ability, then pick each friendly Blood Hags unit on the battlefield, and each visible friendly champion to the arena unit wholly within 12 inches of this Slaughter Queen to be the target. For the rest of the turn, each time a unit makes a piling move, add 3 to the distance it can move. Super cool. You then have a new heroic trait, which is based around killing heroes. You also have the Death Raid, which is the new artifact of power, and then the manifestation law, and also your prayer law there as well, which I think is quite nice. So, a really cool thematic force based around the idea of them being sort of gladiators on the tabletop, although not quite as nice as the lovely ITV version, or BBC version, sorry, I should say. But if you are looking to run a slightly more themed force, I think this is the one to go for. I think it's a super cool idea, even though I do like the idea of this sort of cool army based around the Methuselah and stuff like that. I think that just has the edge in terms of what the other stuff you get for it as well, even though I probably would run the Snake Ladies on the tabletop. You also then have a couple of regiments renowned. You have the Crimson Lash, which would fit in quite nicely with the idea of the gladiators, so it's a good one to collect, but also add on to other order forces as you see fit. And then you also have the Kinnarai Deathflight, if you want to make a slightly more mobile addition to your army, is what I was trying to say. There's then a rules reference at the back, which goes through everything, and then of course that is the Battletome completed. As I say, Daughters of Khaine, not a force that I think a lot of people necessarily plump for when it comes to Warhammer Age of Sigmar. I feel like they still have a lot of hangover bits and pieces from old Warhammer days that haven't quite been ironed out and sort of refined as a force. I still feel like they're hanging on to a lot of what made the old Warhammer army, as opposed to making them feel distinctly Age of Sigmar, even though they do have a lot of nice new stuff to kind of take you down that route anyway. I think they could benefit from a few new units and sort of a few updates to some of the older miniatures. I think that would be quite fun. I think a lot of the sort of classic sisters, the classic witch elves could probably do with a little bit of an upgrade, even though I think they still hold up quite nicely, I suppose. The Sisters of Slaughter maybe need something of a little upgrade as well. But if they go down the Ulgu route and they do some fun stuff with Malarion, maybe that would be a nice way for them to go, to kind of blend together the two forces and give you a few different options with them. Of course, you do have Crethusa, the Crone Seer, and that kind of thing in there at the moment too, but I don't think that has been fully realised as a sort of sub-faction within this at this particular point. But definitely worth having a look at if you're looking to do something a little bit different, especially when it comes to doing fun and interesting painting projects. And also if you want to play the good guys with a little bit of a shade of grey about them as well. But yeah, let me know what you think of the Daughters of Khaine and the new Battletome down in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff. I always like to hear what you have to say. Are the Daughters of Khaine for you? Do you think they fit in with the vibe of Warhammer Age of Sigmar? And what kind of themed force would you be making for use on the tabletop? But yeah, like, share, subscribe, dive down into the comments. I love hearing what you have to say, and make sure to check out all the affiliate links and things that I mentioned earlier as well. But I'm going to be moving on, diving into another video. Until the next one, bye for now.